Right now, what I'm going to be going over for you is car insurance. I'll be hitting up a couple of key terms here and some key ideas as we just kind of look it over and try and get some better ideas of how car insurance actually works. So the first thing we should understand about car insurance. Let's go ahead and grab, we'll grab our black pen. Okay, so we have two people. We have Mr. Red, Mr. Blue. Both Mr. Red and Mr. Blue have paid for car insurance, and Mr. Red and Mr. Blue got into a car accident. So they both have insurance, they both got in a car accident. Now, whenever there's a car accident, it's somebody's fault. Okay? Like if I'm driving a little bit too fast or I don't look when I turn, it's going to be someone's fault. And that's what the insurance companies are going to decide is who was at fault. So whose fault was it? So let's say in this example, it was Mr. Blue. Mr. Blue was driving, he wasn't paying attention, and it's his fault. He is at fault for this. Okay, so in this case, because Mr. Blue is at fault, Mr. Red's insurance will not pay really any of these things. Now, why? Well, if their insurance paid whenever you're at fault, people would just go out and create accidents and get money. So his insurance company will not pay any money. But Mr. Blue's will pay for Mr. Red's insurance because Mr. Blue is at fault. So they will pay for a variety of things for Mr. Red. Okay? So let's take a look at some of these things that they'll pay for. Let's look first. The first thing we'll see on here, it talks about bodily injury and property damage and liability. Well, bodily injury is, of course, if you are hurt or injured. Now, notice this takes up quite a large amount simply because those medical bills could be pretty high. So for part of the bill that you pay, this number is going to be probably higher than the rest. There's also a couple of other interesting things here that we can look at. It also says that it is $100,000 for each person. So let's say that there's 4 people in the car. What it's telling us is that each person should get up to $100,000 for their medical expenses, for their injury. So if they all break their legs, they'll have $100,000 coming to them. But there's one more part to this. It also says $300,000 for each accident. So actually, once we reach that limit, that's the most the insurance will pay is that $300,000. So even though 4 people are injured, the most they're going to pay for the whole accident is $300,000. The other thing that we have is we have property damage. So this would be like the car. Okay, if the car is destroyed or something, or there's maybe you run into, excuse me, not the car, but let's say you run into somebody's you hit their house. This will cover that property, right? Any kind of property that's damaged or something happens to it that's related to your car hitting theirs or hitting something will be covered in property damage. So that's one of the first things this covers, bodily injury and property damage. Again, in this case, it's Mr. Blue's insurance paying Mr. Red's, or paying for Mr. Red's problems. Now let's go down to the next thing. There's also something else we should kind of pick up here, and I'm going to use this term as we go through the next part. The word here is deductible. Okay? Now what a deductible is we have something that's called out-of-pocket expenses, which means you pay that yourself. This is part of that deductible, is my out-of-pocket costs. So in this case, it says that for comprehensive, it's $499. So let's say something happens to my car. We'll talk about comprehensive in a second, but something happens to the car, and it's like it's $5,000 to fix the car. Well, in order for me to get that 5,000, I actually have to pay $499 first. Once I get to that $499, now the insurance company will pay the rest of that cost. I pay my out-of-pocket deductible, and once I reach that number, my insurance will cover the rest. So if it's $499 here, that means I pay $499. They're going to pay $4,001 on this end. Okay, so the insurance company pays one side, the deductible is this is what the person needs to pay. And we're going to talk about these two in one moment here. We're going to talk about comprehensive and collision. So we'll see that right now. The first one we have is we're going to start with collision because that's, so let's say you're driving your car and you run into a street light or something like that. Or you just run into something, right? Because that's what collision means. Collision is you hit something with your car. Okay, so in this case, the collision, we can see the deductible is $999 on this. So that means as $999, we call it again out of pocket. Money again that comes out of my pocket, I have to pay that. And then whatever's left, the insurance company pays. So if I run into a street light and it damages my car, I have to pay for $999 to fix it, and then whatever's left, the insurance company will cover. Now, the other part we have here is we also have comprehensive. Okay, now comprehensive is a little different. Comprehensive is something like, let's say there's a hailstorm and there's a lot of ice falling from the sky, and of course it damages your car, right? So comprehensive is something that is not related to driving. Or like in this case, somebody comes and spray paints your car, right? Or maybe you're at a baseball game and someone hits a baseball and it takes out the window, right? So now you have to fix that window. Well, this is comprehensive. You weren't driving the car at the time. It wasn't somebody driving a car into you. It's not related to driving, but it damages your car. This is what we call comprehensive coverage. Now here we can see that comprehensive, it looks like it covers $499. That's $499. That word that we used was deductible, or we call it out of pocket. Again, it comes out of my pocket, I need to pay, and then the insurance company covers the rest. And now the last part here that we might see is something called uninsured or underinsured motorist. Okay, so let's go back to our scenario here. We know that Mr. Red has insurance, but in this case, Mr. Blue does not have insurance. Mr. Blue is at fault. Well, he doesn't have insurance, so how can he pay for Mr. Red's without insurance? They can't take any money. So in this case, what happens is your insurance company will cover you. And it looks like for this one, it has a $250 deductible. So that means he would have to, even though Mr. Red didn't do anything wrong, he has to pay $250 out of pocket. And then they will cover the property damage. And it looks like it looks like that covers up to $25,000 for damage to the car. It also looks like we have personal injury protection. So that covers something like if you have an accident and they have insurance or don't have insurance, you have $5,000 that you get covered so you can pay those hospital bills, because hospital bills can, even if it's $100,000, maybe it's more expensive than that, but hopefully not. So we can see that he has $500,000 for personal injury protection as well. So now we look at all they pay, and this would be the total coverage. Usually it's about 6 months. You pay this total amount, excuse me, and we call this your premium. You pay this premium usually every 6 months, and then they cover all of these things for you when you're driving your car to make sure that if anything happens, they can pay for it. And this is basically some of those key ideas. Again, words like deductible, out of pocket, comprehensive, collision, uh, understanding just the purpose of insurance, and some of these other ideas: underinsured, uninsured motorists, some of these things. So that's all we have for um, insurance, for car insurance.